我会。
Bhante, you mentioned 4 kinds of yogas, but I didn't get it quite clearly. Could you explain them again? And
The 4 yogas in Hinduism?
Yeah, and which one is corresponding to the spiritual striving in Buddhism?
They're all forms of spiritual striving. But Hinduism, I guess, over the years and different schools of thought, so different methods of cultivation have emerged. And really, it depends which one is emphasized, pretty much depends upon the underlying philosophy of that system. So in the Advaita Vedanta, which is the non-dualistic form of Hinduism, the most important method, what's the method that's considered the ultimate, is called Jnana Yoga. I see, yeah. Yeah, so this jnana, it's the same as the Pali jnana. And then in the schools of Hinduism, which are somewhat more dualistic or theistic in orientation, then the main, what's considered the crowning yoga, is devotional yoga, which is bhakti yoga. And so, for example, you know the followers of the Hare Krishna movement? Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama. So they're practicing bhakti yoga. So that is praised in the Bhagavad Gita as being the supreme yoga. And then in both systems, the non-dualistic and the dualistic, those who are not yet capable of following either the jnana or the bhakti to its ultimate, but are sort of consigned by their life situation to work in the world, practice what is called karma yoga. And karma here has the sense not of like kamma as in Buddhism, but karma in the sense of work or activity. And so the idea here is that one is supposed to perform one's work in the world without attachment to the fruits of one's labors, without concern for praise and blame, praise or blame, honor or dishonor, gain or loss. But one just does the work, either if one is following jnana yoga, in the recognition that ultimately there's no dual reality, or in bhakti yoga, one does one's work as an offering to God. And then the fourth kind of yoga is called Raja Yoga, which means the royal yoga. And this is a type of yoga that emphasizes the attainment of samadhi through meditation. And its philosophical basis is a school called Sankhya, which it's a dualistic school in that it emphasizes that there's a distinction between the self, which is called in this system Purusha, the person, and nature, which is Prakriti, and all the entire material world and also all mental activity belongs to Prakriti. The Purusha, the spirit or self, is just the bare witness of everything that is going on in the material and mental world, the world of material and mental phenomena. And so the objective is through samadhi to break sort of ignorance in the Sankhya system is the failure to make the distinction between the Purusha, the bare witness, the bare awareness, which is aware, the self which is aware of everything, and the Prakriti. And so we wrongly identify with the body and with the mental activities. And so the practice in the Raja Yoga, through samadhi, to withdraw, to make the discrimination or distinction between Purusha and Prakriti. And so one draws back into the identification with the Purusha and breaks identification with nature, with Prakriti. And thereby, the liberation in this system is that the Prakriti comes to an end and one remains just as the pure, observant or conscious spirit. Wow, that's a little capsule lesson in the 4 yogas of classical India. What does Buddhism come closest to of these 4? Which? Yeah, I would say Jnana Yoga. Though it has, the meditative system in Buddhism has a lot in common with the Raja Yoga methods.
I was going to say Raja.
Yeah, there's a lot of similarity.
It's not exact.
And that they, not exact, but they use a lot of the same terms. In fact, there's some speculation that Patanjali, who is the author of the Yoga Sutras, the sutras, these are the sayings that are the basis for Raja Yoga, that he was, this speculation that he was familiar with the texts of early Buddhism because he uses some of the same terms, of course, but he sometimes in different ways. Of course, samadhi is a common term throughout the Indian systems, but he has, actually his system of Raja Yoga is an 8-limb system. There are the 8 limbs of yoga, which are the morality of restraint, the morality of virtuous conduct, then assuming a satisfactory posture, then pranayama, which is regulating the breath, then there's pratyahara, which is the drawing in of the senses from engagement with their objects, pratyahara, dharana, which is the fixing of the mind on an object, maintaining a mind steadily on an object. Then dhyana, which is the mind becoming absorbed into the object. So dhyana is the same word as Pali jhana, but that's only the 7th step in Patanjali's yoga system. The 8th step is samadhi, but the samadhi for the yoga system seems to be closer to like the 4th jhana, or even the arupa jhanas in Buddhism. So it seems like what Patanjali calls dhyana is like the lower three jhanas in Buddhism, and samadhi is like the fourth jhana and the formless meditations. Oh, yes.
First of all, Bhante, I'm very impressed by your knowledge on this Hindu meditation system.
It's not so, I don't have very extensive knowledge, but just I've got many years ago a very general knowledge.
We never learned about this stuff in, growing up in
Excuse me?
We never learned about this sort of stuff in Sri Lanka growing up. Yeah, not the background knowledge. Bhante, I wanted to ask you this question about the Ditti yoga, is that right? The bond of views?
Yeah.
So is this specifically of views of a self with regard to 5 aggregates, or like I'm thinking of, let's say, my views about karma? Like it's for me, it's a belief. It's not that I have necessarily proof saying, this thing I did in the past is giving fruit to this right now.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's coming from inside, but kind of an internal insistence of Buddha as the teacher for me. Would these be considered views?
Yeah, this is an interesting point, because the way the Buddhist commentators would look at this, they would say, it doesn't apply to Buddha's views, but only to the views of the non-Buddhist teachers, like the different views of the self and Brahma and the deities and so forth. But I would distinguish between the content of the view and the attitude with which a view is held. And so I would say, if one holds even the Buddha's view, but holds to it dogmatically with this sort of tenacious mind, then I'd say it falls into the bond of views. In fact, there's a sutta, let us see, where is that sutta? I think it's Majjhima Nikaya Sutta number 38. After the Buddha teaches dependent origination, he says, even this view, which is so pure and straight and clear, if you hold to this view and cling to it and take possession of it and treat it as, and treasure it, like you're treating it like a treasure with attachment, would you be following my instruction to use the Dharma just like a raft? And then the monks say no. And so it seems that the Buddha says you don't give up the right view. You have to adopt the view, but you use it as part of the path, not as something that one clings to tenaciously. Then it seems, in my opinion, that it also becomes part of the bond of views.
So, Bhante, when we say bond of views, it's not simply constrained to or limited to the view of what you call Sakkaya Ditti, view of self. It's more than that.
Oh yeah, I would say it includes the whole range of views. Like the Brahmajala Sutta develops 62 views, and we could add hundreds of more that have developed over the centuries. And also, as I said, I would include that attitude of clinging to Buddha's views also within the bond of views.
That's very good. It's freeing because it doesn't necessarily demand 100% of your total faith, like in maybe some other religions where you can't even, what you're saying is you can even question, or you are not necessarily enslaved to the Buddhist teaching.
Yeah, that should be the proper attitude. Okay, Yorong.
But if that is the case, what you were saying were true, then this sutta gave 4 objects, the sensuality, existence, views, and ignorance. They are not necessarily the things that bond us, but the attitude. Because if you read the sutta, it says that, for example, when one does not understand these things as they really are,
Yeah.
and maybe I'll find another. Maybe I'll go to view. View actually says it. So when one does not understand these things as they really are, then lust for views, delight in view, affection for views, infatuation with views, thirst for views. So it seems to me it's not the views that are the problem.
Yeah.
It's your lust, your infatuation, your desire.
Yeah.
Those attitudes the problem.
Yeah.
So I can actually exchange the object views with anything else, and that would be a bondage.
Yeah.
Right, so why do they just have 4 things? Let's say if I replace views with teacher, you have infatuation with teacher, you have this, what else they have? Delight in the teacher, affection in the teacher, thirst for the teacher.
Yeah.
It could be any object.
Yeah, you could really sort of, I guess you could expand the range of the objects of the bonds indefinitely. But probably the text confined the class to 4 kinds of bonds. First, it has to be convenient. And then these would be the main things that people in the Buddha's time would become, especially those who are following a spiritual path, would become attached to. Attached either to sensual pleasures, or one is following the spiritual path out of attachment to some state of existence for rebirth in a heavenly realm or one of the divine realms, or one becomes attached to the view that one has adopted, or the most broadly, that ignorance or not understanding the arising and passing away in regarding the 6 sense bases. But it seems really that not understanding the arising, passing away, gratification, danger, and escape, that is ignorance itself, which enters into each of the other bonds. So ignorance is present in all 4 of them. But we'll come back to the sutta next week and look at it.
Yeah, because I remember there is a sutta in, I think maybe Samyutta Agama, that talks about the yoke being the craving and ignorance.
Oh, I think I know the sutta that you mean. It has the Pali counterpart. Is this with the simile of the bulls?
Yes.
The black bull and the white bull? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is using the word, it uses the word, I think the word used is yoga is also, and it's using it in both senses as a bond and literally as a yoke that joins two bulls. So the question comes up, this is a discussion between, I think, Sariputta and a monk called Mahakotita. The question is raised, is the I the bond of forms, or are forms the bond of the I? And then Sariputta answers, it's not the case that the I is the bond of forms, nor is it the case that forms are the bond of the I, but rather it is the Chandaraga, that is the lustful desire between the two. That is the yoga, the yoke that, or the bond that is there. And then the simile is given, suppose you have a black bull and a white bull, and then they're joined by one yoke. And is the black bull the yoke for the white bull? Or is the white bull the yoke for the black bull? And then the answer is neither bull is the yoke for the other, but it is the yoke or harness that's joining them. That's the yoke for them. I never told you the story how I almost became a Hare Krishnaite. What's so funny? This is, let's see, 1960. This is 1966. And I'm just starting to read in those days about Buddhism and different kinds of Indian spirituality, but it all seems like the masters and teachers of these systems are living way over in Asia in the East. And then one day, this must have been it was the summer of 1966. This was after I finished college and before I went for graduate school. And somehow word came out that there's a real Indian Swami who's arrived in New York, and he's opened a little temple on the Lower East Side, Second Avenue, around 6th Street, East 6th Street, 7th Street, something like that. This is going over the internet. Okay, so I thought wow, the real Swami is here in New York. And so I went to the temple, and then I saw the schedule when he's scheduled to give the lectures. And so one evening, then I went to hear the lecture. And so he gave a lecture, and I have to say he spoke with a very thick Indian accent. So I couldn't understand what he was saying very well. But then when he finished his talk, then the harmonium starts. And then the students, at that point, they're not yet wearing the saffron robes, but they're all still wearing the basic, American young people's clothing of that time. But the harmonium starts, and somebody is playing the drum, and I think he was playing the harmonium. It's like an instrument that gives off a melodic, the melody, and then all of the students start chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And so I thought, I'm sitting there, and so I start chanting too, chanting along, because he's chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. It's supposed to purify the heart and so forth. And so I'm chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, thinking, wow, I'm being a real spiritual person. But then, as I'm sitting there, the students are getting up and starting to dance around. Starting to dance and spin in circles while chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. And then I have two voices speaking in my mind. One voice is saying, telling me, you want to be a spiritual person, get up and start dancing. Then the other voice is saying, don't make a fool out of yourself. Yeah, so the voices had a debate while I'm sitting there, but the skeptical voice won, saying, don't make a fool out of yourself. So that's my... What is that? No. How do we get there? I see.
Thank you. Actually, we were having a lunch conversation just when you're talking about views, but then I think it could be any religion.
Yeah.
You know, there's some people go to extremes, you know, fundamental extremes. It's what I call the wackadoos. And it doesn't matter. I mean, I've seen Buddhist extremists. I've seen, you know, it does not matter the religion, you know, Christian, Catholic, whatever. You know, so I talk about attachment to views, you know.
Yeah.
And then one has to sort of, I think, use discernment.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
And it's just do you think it's just a part of I'm being very prosaic here, just simple human nature that people just get attached to views?
That's very, very, I mean, that's very, very natural.
I mean, sometimes I just wonder, I mean, because we know so much more, you know, scientifically about how things work. I'm not negating the mystic at all. I'm just saying, but there seems to have to be, you know, a balance. I mean, we're programmed really by DNA to do certain things. In some ways, we're still sort of programmed as Cro-Magnon man, you know, in a sense.
Yeah.
We live in a modern world where we don't have to, like, you know, kill saber-toothed tigers and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Yeah. And we don't really need to guzzle down food, you know, because we're not living in a freezing cold cave and so heavy. But yet we still have those just sort of driven urges, which are, it seems in some ways, I mean, they can be controlled, obviously. So I was about to say beyond our control. But in a sense, unless, I guess you're aware of it, in a sense that they could be, quote, you know what I mean? I guess it's beyond, the urges maybe are beyond one's control. One has to,
because
one has to affirmatively work at it.
Because one builds up, especially one builds up a sense of identity based on the view.
I mean, it's almost like we're programmed.
I don't think we're programmed.
I guess that's too strong of a word.
Yeah,
but that's
I
the
think
best word I can think of.
Sort of, if you say you're programmed or we're programmed, it implies that there's somebody or something outside of us that's implanting these tendencies in us. But they're just the inherent aspect of human nature is to, maybe it's part of the quest for security, because the view makes one feel secure in some way. Maybe this is why the Buddha placed so much focus on views. They become objects of attachment because they give a false sense of security. And so when one finds the views challenged, then one loses that sense, or one's sense of security feels undermined. And so then one clings even more tightly to one's views. Okay, any other point or question? Okay, then we'll conclude for today. We'll come back to the sutta next week, because the verses also are interesting. Okay, so let us do the 3 half bows to the Buddha.